So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I'm the Sustainability Director for the town of Acton. We really appreciate your commitment and the time you're all contributing to your Wednesday evening to provide input and add your voice to the town's climate action plan. Welcome to the Acton's Climate Action Visioning Workshop. Next, please. Our workshop goals today are to introduce Acton's climate action planning process and work to date. We'd like to use this opportunity now that we have you all in the same Zoom room to gather feedback and have conversations that will help inform the town's vision for its climate action plan and goals. In particular, tonight we want to understand community priorities for the climate action plan, collect input on potential strategies to consider for the CAP, and finally, we would like this workshop to serve as a launching pad to encourage participation throughout the CAP process. And I'm going to mute my cell phone so that's not a distraction throughout the evening. Next, please. After I run through the welcome and introductions, we'll do caretaking announcements. Then we have a fun icebreaker activity that will take a few minutes. At 7:20, MAPC and I will provide more context around the need and role of a climate action plan. At 7:35, we have our visioning exercise that will give everyone who's here a chance to provide their input on the town's climate action priorities. Your work will be anonymous unless you choose to make it public. We will then be sent to breakout rooms that will be randomly generated to discuss key priorities for the plan and potential strategies. I'll be popping into various rooms throughout the evening to hear some of the conversation. And then finally, at 8:20 p.m., we have our closing. Next, please. We partnered with MAPC for the development of the Climate Action Plan Blueprint. Julie is the project manager. Van is the strategy lead. I see that they're waving their hands. Yolanda is the community engagement lead. And Cami Peter is the advisor. She's not here tonight, but Julie, Van, and Yolanda, you saw them waving their hands. They're here with us tonight. We also have a ton of other MAPC members who are working behind the scenes, playing music for us and supporting us in the breakout rooms. So thank you to them as well. Next slide, please. MAPC is a regional planning agency that serves the people who live and work in 101 municipalities of metropolitan Boston that you see colored here. MAPC's mission is to work towards sound municipal management. They address a wide range of issues, and when it comes to climate, MAPC is committed to helping communities reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and prepare for the effects of climate change by creating and implementing climate and energy action plans, hazard mitigation plans, energy use and greenhouse gas inventories, climate vulnerability assessments, and climate resiliency plans. And now I'll hand it over to Yolanda, who's going to take us through the caretaking announcements.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks everyone for joining us. So just some quick housekeeping items before we move into the substance of the day. So some main pieces is that we are recording today's session for anyone who can't join us and for you all to reference at a later point. So please know that we're recording, so you can turn on your video if you want to have yourself recorded and your face on video, but if you don't, you can just turn that off. And for participants to best get the most out of today, we would love if you all can rename yourself, just so that folks know who you are and who's in the room. So you can do that by clicking the participants button, and there's like a little triangle. You click on that and you can select your name and right click and rename yourself. You can also hover on top of your picture and click the three little dots, and that will give you an option for renaming at the bottom of the list. So just the more information, the better. You can put your name and your pronouns, or you can put your name and whatever group you're affiliated with. Another item is that we are also going to be utilizing the chat for different items tonight. So please try to use that to comment on different pieces. We'll use that for an icebreaker activity. You can access the chat at the bottom of your Zoom window, or at the top if you're on a tablet. It should just say chat, and there's a little call out box for that. And the other piece is that we would love if you all can turn your video on. I know that some people might not be comfortable being on video because it's recorded, but it would definitely increase the engagement and make it a little bit more interesting with video on. So we're encouraging that today. Some other items that we want to share with you is just some discussion guidelines so that we can best take advantage of today and have a productive conversation. And we want you all to see if we want you all to participate, but these are basically just some ground rules in a lot of ways. So one, you're all muted right now, but as the day progresses, you'll be able to unmute yourself, specifically in the breakout rooms. And we would love if you can also help us manage your audio. So mute yourself if you're not speaking, just so that we don't get any background noise and it's not distracting for those who are speaking. And we would love if you all can just keep in mind that we're all here to learn. We all come from different places when it comes to our learning, and we have different perspectives. So just keep that in mind as we have our conversations today. Please focus on listening, especially when somebody is sharing some content and some ideas. Try to actually listen to them and not just hear what they're saying, but try to process that and listen, not to react or respond, but listen to understand. And then whenever possible, refrain from multitasking. I know it's hard and we all live really busy lives and we might have a lot going on at home, but specifically in the breakout rooms too, try to be as present as possible. And then try to assume best intent. We want to have a constructive conversation, and we want people to have a tone where we can build community and we can actually get the work done on this topic. So just try to practice today in a way that, people come into the table in good faith. And please try to use accessible language. Try to avoid like jargon and undefined acronyms. It just makes it a lot easier for people to participate in these type of meetings. And then we would love for everyone to have an opportunity to share, specifically in the breakout room. So try to make space for people to have their voices heard. And then if things could be said that, might, offend you or might push your buttons or challenge you in a way tonight. So we want you, if that does happen, and you said something, all you have to do is say sorry, apologize. If something is said that bothers you, maybe acknowledge it. Tell the group, tell the facilitator. Let's see how we can work and learn from these opportunities. And then we also have Van, who's one of our staff members, and she's basically a sidebar person. So you can send her a direct message and she can support you in having those issues addressed. Anything connected to our discussion guidelines, if you feel like those items are not being adhered to tonight, just send a direct message to Van and she will support you in getting that addressed. So those are our discussion guidelines. If you have any questions, just let us know. You can add them in the chat or direct message Van. Today, we want to create a space where folks feel included and they can have their voices heard. Both Acton and MAPC are committed to fostering an inclusive and diverse learning environment. We acknowledge our differences and accept our diversity in gender, sexuality, disability, age, social economic status, ethnicity, race, culture. All these things are our strengths, and we strive to foster equity and to maximize respect and fairness. Today, we need all participants to engage constructively and treat each other with dignity and respect. And please feel free to contact our team if you would like to make any suggestions or if there's any concerns. And you could do that using our emails or sending Van again a direct message. So we're going to jump into an icebreaker. So for this, you would just need to open your chat. And in the chat, we would love if you can share one to at the most 4 words to describe these different images that you see in front of you. So we would love to see if give me 1 second here. Just want to make sure you have the right exact wording for the rules for this. So yeah, 4 words at the most for how you react to the images. We'll give you about 1 minute per slide. And then we'll also make it clear what those words are attributed to, which slides. Please raise your hand if you would want to respond to these different images, like just out loud, and we can unmute you and you can share your thoughts around it. So any reactions, 1 to 4 words, starting now. And we'll keep an eye on the chat.
So I'm just gonna read some of these out loud. I see joy, kid-friendly, dedicated bike lanes, safe biking, loads of bikes, family activity, safety concerns, exercise, air, people power, eco-friendly fun, exercise, mobility, safety, exercise, mobility, connections, bike-friendly, enjoying the outdoors, biking outdoors, fitness, balanced, bicycle, safe, fun, careful biking, too many cars on the right, Braille trail, connecting towns, greener transportation, lots of people biking, nicer without cars, busy lanes, having fun on the left, getting there on right, still cars, fun, transportation, sharing, equitable, fun family activity, gas-free. Wow, I love all the interaction here. Thank you so much for the participation. The whole road should be for bikes. A lot of signage on the right, driving on the left, children safely biking. And we already reached a minute, but I can see that we could go on forever.
So we'll pause there, and Andrea is gonna just make it clear that we're moving on to the next slide. So this is, you see 2 images here. So please, we're gonna give you another minute to respond and give us your reactions in the chat again. And if you want to share anything out loud, just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. So go ahead.
Okay, I'll start reading these. Clean energy, yes, yes. Increase energy efficiency and independence. Progress, heat pump tech and more solar can't happen fast enough. Solar panel growth, green tech, solar power better, renewables, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Low carbon energy, tiny steps towards electrification. Clean solar power, responsible, energy efficient heat pumps and solar go together. Solar clean energy, a fan. Installing solar panels. What brand of heat pump? The future is now. Skilled workers, renewable energy, need building-wide infrastructure updates. Good for the climate. I really appreciate everyone's following the 4-word limit for the most part. Left, more green, right, less green. Incentivize solar, yes, please. Using solar panels and heat pumps. And that's 1 minute and 10 seconds. So next one.
Thank you, Andrea. Oops. We're on slide 3 now. So you see 2 images and we'll give you another minute.
Okay. Open space, community outdoor space, community, spending time outside, community gathering, people together again. Hooray. Yes. Here, here. We are all connected, mingling, shared space, breathe the air, trees, a gathering. Green space is solution, using outdoor spaces, literacy and nature. No cars now. Pre-pandemic, hope post-pandemic too. Yeah. Shop locally, go outside, community, fun, outdoors, friends, fruitlands, green spaces. Green space invites gathering, low-tech outdoor activities, outside, invitations to be outdoors, outdoor enjoyment, fun outdoors together, using outdoor space, outdoor fun, aesthetic, pre-pandemic, and hopefully post-pandemic too. Community and nature, communities together outside, a pleasant time being had by all. And that's a minute. So next one.
Great, thanks, Andrea. So we're moving on to the 4th slide now. For anyone who has joined us we are just responding with using 4 words at the most to these different slides that you see in front of you. So just tell us your reactions and what you're thinking in regards to these images in the chat, in the Zoom chat. Thank you.
Fast chargers, EV charging stations, EV infrastructure, Eversource, let it happen. Electric cars, electricity, so sensible, cheap. Go EVs, future of transportation. Electric cars, greener transport. Love electric vehicles, charging station growth. Where I hope we are going, carbon-free, electric cars, EV, green transportation. Need these EV chargers, should be used by everyone. EV charging, EVs are pretty cool. What country on left? I really appreciate Jim questioning a lot of these sources. Fun to drive, should be everywhere. Like double charger option. Acronym definition, EV equals electric vehicle. Thank you, Julie. Gas stations worrying, need glasses for sign. Had to find open source photos, Jim. That's it, that's time for that one.
Great, thank you, Andrea. And now we're off to slide 5. So again, respond to these with 4 words or less, just your reactions in the chat.
Trees and farms, community agriculture, gardening, open space, agriculture, regenerative agriculture, trees, baby good trees. On right, that's me. I was wondering if Jim, you would ask any questions about that person. More biomass, local agriculture. Left needs improvement, natural solutions, farming and community, agriculture, green, local food security. Local farming, yes. Narrow Park tree planting, planning for the future. Where is the housing? More trees are important. Planting trees, need windmills on farms. Oaks at Nara, too much tilling and plastic. Remaking our food system, agriculture, preservation. And that's a minute.
Thank you, Andrea. And this one is our last one. So we're on slide 6. So please respond with 4 words or less to this slide in the chat, just your reactions.
Home at last, bring back the van. Public transit, public transportation, getting there sensibly. Acton has a bus, mass transit, needs improvement, relief, mass transit. Love our commuter rail, transportation options, trains, infrastructure. Pickup option, carpooling, public transport, elders can travel, electrify that van. EV, electric vehicle crosstown, electrify that train. None of those are electric. Let's have more of this. Public transit needs nearby housing. And that's a minute. Great.
Thank you everyone for participating in these quick icebreakers and giving us all this rich information for us to take in. I'm going to hand it off to Andrea now for some context setting.
Thank you all so much for your participation in the icebreaker. That was a really fun game. Now I'm going to give you a little more context on how we got here. Acton has a long history of sustainability with a passionate and engaged community that continues to push for actions that protect and preserve the town's rich biodiversity and also speed the shift towards cleaner and greener technology in response to climate change. To give you a little snapshot of the last decade, Acton was designated a green community in 2010 by the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. There's the Acton Board of Selectmen Environmental Sustainability Policy passed in 2018, the greenhouse gas inventory conducted in 2019, and of course the September 8th town meeting declaring a climate emergency last year, which received near unanimous approval. And even more recently, at last week's town meeting, 2 warrant articles were recently passed, which would require new buildings and major rehab projects around Acton to use clean energy rather than fossil fuel system. While this move is pending approval from the state legislature, the passing of the articles demonstrates the town's commitment to address climate change. And of course, none of these actions would have been possible without a passionate and hardworking community. There's a Green Advisory Board, the Acton Climate Coalition, Mothers Out Front, Sunrise Acton, Resource Force. There's also other public entities, the Acton Boxborough Regional School District and the Acton Water District. And I actually know we have representation from all of these groups here tonight, so that's really exciting. Next, please. By November of this year, the town of Acton will have developed a climate action plan blueprint, which will include 15 to 20 strategies for the town to prioritize for the next 5 to 10 years to curb community-wide greenhouse gas emissions. This includes recommendations for buildings, energy supply, mobility, and nature-based solutions. The goal of the climate action plan development process is to set climate targets that align with the priorities established in the town's climate emergency declaration, which explicitly state that members of Acton Town Meeting call on town government and staff and all Acton civic groups, businesses, and residents to commit to a climate mobilization effort with appropriate support from the state and federal governments to bring net town-wide emissions, carbon emissions to zero as quickly as possible with a target date of 2030. The goal is also to include mitigation strategies that center on equity and enhance community resilience wherever possible. And as stated in the emergency declaration, pursue a plan that ensures that the cost of such mobilization efforts do not unfairly burden those who are economically or socially disadvantaged, and that the benefits of a realized sustainable future accrue to all. Right now, we're in the process of finalizing interviews with staff members, which is helping us to identify opportunities that align potential strategies with other departmental priorities. We're also starting to interview stakeholders to understand various perspectives and capture opportunities, challenges, and any concerns, as well as excitement around climate action and sustainability in Acton. We will also be forming 3 working groups that will be focused on 3 different climate action priorities. There's nature-based solutions, buildings and energy, and mobility. I know some of you have filled out the questionnaire seeking interest in being part of one of these working groups. If you're interested in participating and you haven't filled it out, I encourage you to do so. We'll include a link at the end of the presentation. Next, please. So in the town's CAP, we're going to be thinking of actions in Acton's direct controlled influence. So here you see 3 different spheres: actions in Acton's direct control, actions Acton can influence, actions outside of Acton's direct control of influence. So we'll be focusing on the 2 blue circles. So the actions that Acton can influence and the actions in Acton's direct control. To give you an example of what we mean by actions outside of Acton's direct control or influence, those are the types of actions that another state is taking or that are happening in a different country or in a business outside of Massachusetts. Actions Acton can influence are state and federal level actions or sort of pushes for certain types of actions. And then of course there's the actions in Acton's direct control, which will be prioritizing those that are lowest cost and highest impact. Next, please. So to give you some context on what's happening at the state level, this past March, Governor Charlie Baker signed an act creating a next generation roadmap for Massachusetts climate policy. The bill codifies the target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. It raises the target for emissions reductions by 2030 from 45% to 50% and requires emissions limits set at 5-year increments. There's a lot of text on this slide. But the goal is to give you a snapshot of the components of the new law, which includes increased protections for environmental justice communities across Massachusetts. It authorizes the administration to implement a new voluntary energy efficiency building code for municipalities. And it also allows the Commonwealth to procure an additional 2,400 megawatts of clean, reliable offshore wind by 2027. Next, please. The state also published its own version of a climate action plan called the 2030 Clean Energy and Climate Plan. The plan identifies a need for a balanced clean energy portfolio with significant offshore wind, more interstate transmission to increase access to clean energy, widespread electrification of transportation and building heat, The plan also includes policy proposals for buildings, mobility, energy, land, waste, and agriculture to reach carbon targets. It's important to note that this climate action plan was actually published before the climate bill was passed. So some of the targets in this plan are less ambitious than the climate bill, but the current plan is being reviewed and updated to meet the climate bill targets. Next, please. To give you some examples of what our neighbors in Massachusetts are doing, in Arlington, as part of their goal to reduce emissions in the buildings, they set a target to create a permanent town. They're calling it the Electrify Arlington website to support residents with information and resources to electrify their homes and buildings. And another target to support training opportunities for town departments, boards, and committees, as well as developers and contractors on LEED, net zero, passive house, and other high performance energy standards. In Natick's climate action plan, they set a target for half of all viable roofs in the town to have solar by 2030. And for all of the town's electricity supply to come from 100% carbon-free sources by 2030. In Concord, they set a target to convene land managers to identify common goals to develop a forest management plan and structure and evaluate existing regulations and bylaws for opportunities to integrate considerations of bike and pedestrian connections in new or redevelopment projects. And now I'll pass it on to Julie Curdy. Thank you, Julie.
Great. Hi, everybody. And again, my name is Julie Curdy. I work at MAPC, and I'm the project manager from MAPC's side for this work. Yolanda, if you could go to the next slide, actually. I was just going to take a few minutes to talk about equity in the climate action plan. And we want to center equity throughout the planning process. We know that this is a priority in Acton and of many of the community members as well. So equity is a word that's been used a lot, and we just wanted to define it here for our discussion today and how we'll be thinking about it via the planning process. And so equity, it's a practice, and it takes into consideration history, policies, power structure, and culture of a community and responds to those existing dynamics by calibrating tools and resources according to each population's need. So we often think about equity from a procedural perspective, so ensuring that those who aren't usually at the table, but who are impacted by climate, have the opportunity to fully participate and help make decisions, and also from a distributional sense. So if there are benefits from an action or a plan, ensuring that those go to those who have been most historically impacted by climate issues and environmental justice issues and other equity issues. So that's a way of thinking about equity. On the next slide, just a few other terms that you'll hear often. Another one is equality. So equality is different than equity. And with equality, all groups are treated the same without considering historical context or current dynamics. So that's where equality and equity are different. And again, in this plan, and generally we want to be focusing on equity with the ultimate goal of hopefully reaching equality. You'll also hear us talk about diversity, which is the presence of different groups, populations, and identities in the community, and then inclusion, which is ensuring that all of those different groups can be at the table and have access within the community. On the next slide, thinking about diversity and inclusion, again, when we're talking about those terms, we mean diversity in terms of race, socioeconomic class, ability, immigration status, gender and sexual orientation, language, and age. And again, ensuring inclusion so that people who have all these different identities feel like they can belong and be part of the climate action process and the different actions that result. And then so the last slide, throughout the planning process, when we think about different strategies that can be part of Acton's climate action plan, we can conduct an equity assessment and think about with any action or strategy, we think about who has historically been impacted by this issue in Acton, and then who might be impacted by the action in the future moving forward. And then if there are benefits or harms from a potential action, how are those distributed and how can we make it that they're distributed equitably as possible? So I'll pause there. And I think we have a few minutes in case people have questions for Andrea or for me on this portion of the presentation. I think people can put their questions into the chat and Andrea was going to facilitate answering those.
I do see one question from Melissa. She asked, she would love to know how much coordination is going on between towns, to what extent are efforts being coordinated. I do know that for some climate action plans, there is some like co-development of the climate action plans. So Beverly and Salem are working together. Natick, Melrose, and Arlington, I believe, worked together for their climate action plan. And then in terms of Acton, there's always collaboration that can happen with nearby towns. I think as we dive deeper into the development of this climate action plan, if there's any sort of actions that would require collaboration with other states, I think that's where we would see it. I'm not sure how much collaboration we would see at the stage of developing the climate action plan, but when it comes to implementing, I could see a lot of collaboration. What new sources are available to address these issues? David, would you want to elaborate on your question? Address which issues? Climate change? Oh, there's a lot of new technology out there. Where every year there's new technology. I think we're gonna all figure it out together in terms of finding out what resources we want to tap into. And then money, of course. There's grant money out there, and we of course want to make sure that we take advantage of the money that's out there, but also expand the pile of resources and use that money most efficiently. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we're out there to seek new resources.
And then Andrea, do you want to go back? I think Bob had a question as well. He said, when we think about equity, how do we take into consideration people who have historically been excluded in
I'm sorry, I missed that. Acton historically. Would you like to answer that, Julie?
I can jump in. Yeah, I think a few things that we're doing in the process, working with Andrea on putting together the plan. Yolanda and Andrea have been doing a stakeholder assessment that they're in the process of. So they're reaching out to different groups within Acton who can represent different communities when we're thinking about diversity in terms of Acton, to get their opinions on the climate action plan and figure out how they might want to participate in the process, and then strategies that we might want to consider. We also have planned in the process a few focus groups, and we want to focus those groups on populations who historically haven't been part of the conversation in Acton. So we can think about youth, certain elderly populations, renters, communities of color in Acton, different groups that we can tap to get their opinions as part of that process. So those are two ways. And then there's also working groups that will be part of the planning process that Andrea will mention later. And I know she and we are going to make an effort to do outreach as part of those working groups to hopefully bring people to the table who haven't had the chance to participate before. So I'd say those pieces.
Thank you. Miles asked, is any planning being focused on subdivisions like large condo complexes, particularly those that operate their own utilities? In terms of what we prioritize in the climate action plan, it's really going to be driven by the community input. And I do know that condo complexes, a lot of the issues that condo complexes face are quite unique. And it has come up in conversations, and I believe it'll continue to come up as we seek community input. So I do think there'll be strategies that come to the top that address specific issues for condo complexes. And David, I see that some other people answered the question. They said increase state and federal support. Also large rental complexes, public housing, elder housing. And just to add to what I said previously, 30% of Acton is made up of renters. And that's a population that we're putting a big importance on. We realize that renters face very unique barriers when it comes to addressing the emissions in their home, and also in terms of decreasing the cost of their energy. So we will be looking closely at strategies for renters. Do we know which? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to jump in to answer that one. I think the last question in the chat was, do we know which people or populations have been adversely impacted in Acton to date? And I think there's a few tools from the state that we can use to think about that in Acton. The state has just updated, or if they haven't, they'll soon be released. They're updating their environmental justice maps. So the state has a definition for an environmental justice community. It got updated in the Clean Energy and Climate Bill that Andrea was mentioning. So we can look at those maps and look at communities in Acton to see if any geographic areas in Acton meet that definition. That's one way. Another way is when you think about strategies that might be costly, you can ask about income stratification in Acton and ask about who may have challenges affording those strategies or who may have had challenges in the past accessing those benefits. And then you can do the same in terms of access to programs. Are there language barriers to programs, cultural barriers to programs, things like that you can think of. Yolando has flagged that I use an acronym, EJ, environmental justice. I'm going to ask maybe if Van or Yolando could pull the definition into the chat, because it's actually a little bit long what the state just put out for environmental justice, so I'm not going to get it exactly right. But I think the state looks at environmental justice communities and defines them based on a threshold of who are people of color in those communities, who are lower income in those census tracts, and then who also may not speak English as their primary language, but I don't actually know the new thresholds that were set. So maybe one of you guys could pull in the definition for us quick. I think if that's okay, we might try to move on. So we have time for the small group discussions and for more input. And I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat, but if more questions come in, feel free to drop them in. Even if we can't answer them during the workshop now, they're helpful for us to know and address in the future. So Yolanda, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. So now we want to invite everybody to participate in a visioning exercise called Postcard, either to or from the future, I guess, depending on which preposition feels right. But we want to invite you to think about the year 2040. And you are now in the year 2040, and you are writing a postcard from your future self in 2040 to your current self today in 2021. And we want you to take a moment to write a paragraph or two and tell yourself today, from your future self, what happened in 2030 and what does Acton look like now in 2040. So there's a link on the slide, and we'll drop it in the chat too. It will take you to a quick survey page where you can write in your postcard. So if people want to take some time to do that now. And then there's 2 questions on the survey as well that just ask if you're okay with us reading your postcard out loud in this workshop, and then potentially using the content from the postcard and the climate action plan itself. All of those would be done anonymously, and you can fill that out as well. And then after you fill out the survey, there's a chance to save a copy of your postcard as well. So if you want to do that, so you can reference it. If anybody has any questions about the exercise, feel free to drop them in the chat, but otherwise we'll turn on a little bit of light music and give you, I think, about 8 to 10 minutes to fill out your postcard. All right, thanks everybody for getting in your postcards. I think we're going to take some time to analyze them while we're in the small group discussions, but wanted to just read out a few of them anonymously to everybody to give you a sense of what others are thinking. So I think Andrea has a few that she can read out, and then I can read some as well. So here's the first one, perhaps inspired by the recent week. Thank you for cooling things down in Acton. We know that 95 and 100-degree heat days were common in June and expected to expand exponentially without serious climate actions. Young people were at the forefront in 2021. The progress in reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions shows the collective power of community. Acton local, regional, state, and beyond. This combined with new science, technology, engineering, and math technologies and advances all made a difference. The key to meeting the goal was to shift cars to electric, which happened to be, and heating with fossil fuels is no longer the standard for homes and buildings. Clean energy rules. The earth is cooler because we all took collective action in Acton, Massachusetts, and beyond to meet the 2030 goals. Proud to have been part of the seeds planted to reverse climate change locally and beyond for future generations. Want to jump in, Andrea?
Yeah, the next one is 2030 was a good year. The community has finally reconciled many competing interests and has been able to develop a shared vision for the future. By 2040, that shared vision has begun to flourish, where housing inequity has been addressed, renewable energy is abundant, and a sustainable balance of land use has been achieved. With the community living within its financial and natural resource means, the population is happy, healthy, and more productive. Should I read the next one, or do you want to jump in?
I'll jump in with another one, another heat-inspired one. Oh, so sorry, I had my video off and didn't realize it. 2021. Boy, it is hot here. We are having a heat wave, and they are setting records in the Pacific Northwest. The forest fires are going to be horrible this year, and a high-rise in Florida just crumbled to the ground. There are rumors that it was caused by high water levels and the corrosion caused by seawater frequently in the basement. And this is a wealthy country. 2040, we have finally gotten mostly off of fossil fuels. There are solar panels on every roof that has good access to the sun, and everyone is driving an electric car. Electric utilities learn to make it easy to create a hookup in your garage, even for condos. There are newer technologies to generate clean electricity and to sequester carbon. The climate is still crazy, but we are surviving. Acton had a few floods where severe storms made brooks and rivers run over their banks.
That's a lot of imagery. Really great writing in 10 minutes. I'm really impressed. Two amazing changes took place over the last 20 years. Natural gas and oil are no longer used in the town for heating and cooking. There were challenges, of course, but the state and federal funding for the transition helped a lot. And the continued drop in cost of renewable electricity was a big factor. However, the installation of houses and the spread of geothermal installations were key. The other big change is the availability of public transportation. The spread of electric buses and the recognition by all that cars to everywhere was not supportable really made it just easier and more social to take public transportation around town. The local shopping centers, following a bit the West Acton model, made walking and bicycling also practical when the weather is agreeable. Life is better.
Right, and then maybe just one more, and then we won't be losing all the other postcards we got, but we'll take more time to look them over. This is the last one for now. Hey you, it has been a wild ride and sometimes really scary. Despite efforts to get moving on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, the climate really started to tilt by 2030. In Acton, we had 9 years of weather extremes with super hot and dry summers. All the little pieces of our world that we ignored, like bees and other pollinators, had population crashes and food production became even more damaged. Meanwhile, other insects moved north into our forests, droughts, windstorms, hurricanes, whole species of trees dying. It was horrifying. But people began to truly realize that we are one planet. Everything on life is connected. Instead of thinking of ourselves as financial whizzes out to win our individual slices of pie, we started to think of ourselves as ecosystems where we need to work together. We finally turned off the fossil fuels spigot. The climate is showing signs of improvement, but we have a long way to go. Pretty intense imagery there as well. Thank you everybody for taking the time to fill out those postcards. I think they're going to help us to really think about what Acton's vision for its climate future can be based on all of your input. I'm going to help put together a vision statement that can inform the climate action plan. So we'll have a little bit more to share out about the postcards at the end of the workshop. But what we want to do next is go into small groups for about the next 25 to 30 minutes. We have a designated facilitator in each of the small groups, and those discussions are designed to get your input on what the priorities should be in the climate action plan, and then some initial ideas about what some of the strategies that we should think about based on the priorities that you're interested in. So your facilitator will give you more guidance, and Sasha Perotti is going to assign you to a breakout room. So we'll see you back in about 25 to 30 minutes. All right, welcome back, everybody. We hope you had really robust small group discussions. It's great to see everybody's faces on the screen. And we know there's never enough time, so I'm sorry if we cut off some good conversation. I think Van was going to take us through a few closing pieces, and then Andrea, and then we'll get you on your way for your evening.
Yeah, so my group has a really, really great kind of overall discussions. And so I would love to hear from the other groups as well. So let's start with maybe Jesse or Sasha or Yolanda. If they're, let's start with Yolanda. Would you like to make someone in your group, or would you like to kind of have some key information report back?
I'm gonna share out here. So in general, my group, they were surprised that folks were optimistic when sharing with the postcards, and they think the postcards are going to be generally optimistic. But there was also a few people who were a bit more realistic, and they appreciated that. And there was a general consensus that some of the items were not really super surprising too, that they were hearing things that they imagined folks would write. And then when it comes to items that they think should be prioritized, definitely energy. How are we going to have the energy that we need? How are we going to be able to move to more sustainable energy? And how can we make our local grid more green? And so there was a conversation around that. How do we move to new technologies and meet our future electricity needs? And then there was another conversation around how are we going to get the town to incentivize and get the public to move to take action too. So are we going to do that with certain incentives, and how are those going to be funded? And there's different ideas around funding for this, like the town should push the state to create a, I want to have the wording here correct. It's a green bank, basically a state green bank. That's a way to generate funds, and it's an interesting strategy. And there was questions around how do we deal with our waste, and how do we manage land too, because all of those are things that impact our energy and impact the town becoming more green.
Sounds good. Thank you, Yolanda. I think similarly, we all have a lot of questions still, and a lot of actions and strategies we're striving for. I think in the interest of time, let's have the other groups report out in the chat. So just if you're the facilitator of the other chat room, please just kind of just provide the summary of your discussion similar to Yolanda in the chat, so everyone can see that as well. All right. So, Julie, it sounds like we have more highlights from the postcards that you would like to share.
I think so. We just had one slide that I pulled together that just shows the postcards. Let me just share my screen quick so you can see that. All right. Can folks see a slide, hopefully? Thumbs up. Yeah, okay,
Yes.
Great. That's a little bit small. So yeah, this is just an initial take on the postcards. We'll do a lot more deep dives because you guys all wrote a lot and really awesome stuff. So we need more time to go through it, but just wanted to pull up some of the key themes that I saw on multiple postcards here. And in the future would organize them thematically too, but a lot of themes around electrification. So electrified homes, rail lines, cars, public transit, a lot about different ways of getting around and mobility generally. So carpooling, sidewalks, public transportation. Renewable energy was a common theme, unsurprisingly, 100% renewable, solar, district microgrids, air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps, energy efficiency. And then we heard a lot about people and themes about people and collaboration in the postcard, which was really great. So about how we need to have a livable future, how Acton has an engaged community, how the community was collaborating. Themes of economic equity came out in the postcards, youth leadership, learning from our elders, and a lot about how great and local Acton is. So buying local, focusing on local food systems and green spaces. And then a net zero commonwealth came up on several postcards too. And then on the right were just some of the themes that also came up that's worth acknowledging, that climate change brings real change and real risks to Acton and real vulnerabilities. So heat, drought, floods, disease, fires, hurricanes, species extinction, and climate refugees, which is why we're doing this work in part to try to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change and hopefully build a better future, which I think was a theme on almost every postcard that we saw. But some real realism there too. There's tough times ahead, as this last week has shown us with the second heat wave of June, and we hope everybody's doing okay. Van, back over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. That's great. Yeah, I'm definitely feeling the heat wave. My group agree. All right, so last but not least, we would love your participation one more time. So while Andrea, I think I'll hand over to you to have some final words, some closing out and next steps. But as you're listening to Andrea, please add into the chat one more time. I think we would love to hear from you. What excites you most about Acton's climate work? So I post a question in here, and feel free to just, share some of your thought of what excites you about this work. What you heard today, what we're doing, and what is coming up next in a few months. Thank you. Andrea?
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. I know it's late for a lot of you, and you have competing priorities, so I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it. I had the opportunity to pop into a few groups. I saw a lot of sticky notes. Some of the facilitators were sharing their screen, showing all the actions that were being called out, and I was really inspired. It really demonstrated the level of energy and support there is for climate action. I also noticed in a few of the breakout sessions, a lot of you were very moved by the postcard exercise and thinking about what Acton looks like in 2040. And I think it's a reminder of why we do what we do, and what drives us. And it's really to protect this world for future generations. And also, if there are people or groups that you think we're missing from the conversation, I encourage you to please reach out to me and share the survey link as well. There's going to be an opportunity to participate in a second workshop in September, which will hopefully be in person. I also mentioned at the very beginning that there's a questionnaire that you can fill out if you'd like to be more involved or just stay informed throughout the process. If you haven't already filled out the survey, please do so. And like I said, please share it with others who you think should provide their input here as well. The more the merrier, of course. We would like to get as many responses as possible. And with that, thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time, and looking forward to connecting with you all.